Hey tea heads, this is Don from Mayleaf. If you've been looking for a variable temperature gooseneck kettle, then no doubt your eye has been on the fellow STAGG EKG, the Brewista Artisan gooseneck. You may have also been looking at the Bonavita gooseneck. Maybe this one though is new to you. This is a relatively new, unhyped contender, the OXO gooseneck. And today I'm going to be comparing all of the kettles. The Bonavita's not here because it broke a while ago, so I'm not going to keep a broken kettle, but I still have it in my memory. I've done reviews about the Bonavita, I've done reviews about the Fellow, I've done reviews about this Brewista, so you can go check them out if you want. But before you go, let me just say that this will be the most up-to-date review with all of my thoughts across all of the kettles pretty much. But if you want to dive into the deeper detail, then go check out the individuals. I'll put links below, as I said. So, the OXO gooseneck kettle, much less talked about, much less hyped compared with the other ones. It's not available currently in the UK or Europe, only available in the US. So a tea head in the US who was raving and raving about this kettle, Adam, actually purchased this kettle, sent it to me, sent a voltage converter, so it was a big outlay for him. So thank you so much, Adam, for sending it. But you can tell he really loved the kettle, or loves the kettle that much, that he decided that he couldn't stand me not trying it anymore, and so he sent it to me. So thank you very much, Adam. Does it live up to the expectations? We're going to be going through all of the geeky details. It's going to probably get ultra geeky for some people, but I am obsessed with the details. And I will also say from the outset, like I've said in all of the kettle reviews that I've done, I'm going to be focusing my review specifically on tea brewing, Gongfu tea brewing, but I think that most of what I'm going to say applies to coffee or other beverages as well. So I'm going to be talking about price, build quality, style, capacity, speed of heating, the temperature accuracy, the temperature range, the ease of use, the keep hot function, timer functions, pour functions, and general ergonomics. And I'm going to be scoring them all as in first, second, third, fourth place. Some of them will be tied, of course, and then we're going to come up with our winner. So let's begin. First up, price. The fellow STAGG EKG is the most expensive of the bunch, coming in at around $180 last time I checked. And it's very important that I say that this review is going to be based upon the old model, the original model of this kettle. I know that fellows have released a second or an updated model. I have not tested that. If they want to send me one, you're most welcome to, and I will review it for you. So 180, then the Brewista coming in at about 160, then the Bonavita, last time I checked, was about 120, and this OXO here is just over $105 listed on the website. So a lot cheaper. So it definitely wins that battle, hands down. Now, let's talk about the build quality. They all, at first glance, and when you pick them up, have good build quality, but after using them, you get to know them. Right. Let's talk about what they're good at. They're all good because they're all fully stainless steel. The Bonavita has a tiny bit of plastic up at the top, but it's above the waterline. So if you're very pernickety, then that might bother you, but it doesn't bother me. They're all fully stainless steel. They all have a relatively large opening so that it's easy to fill and to clean. Although I would say that the Brewista's a bit smaller and is similar to the Bonavita because it's got more of that curved shape to it. But they're all great. They all, have initially a good weight about them. So let's talk about some of the drawbacks for some of them. The first, a little bugbear of mine, is plug length. I hate it when I can't have long plug lengths, and that I know is specific to tea because I like to bring tea to my table and I like to be able to brew at my table, and if I have to run lots of extension cables, it annoys me. I will say that the Brewista comes out on top because it has got a detachable kettle lead, and therefore you can basically get a kettle lead of your preferred length. The STAGG, the OXO, and the Bonavita, they all have fixed kettles and they all have kettle leads about that long. So they're designed to be plugged in and used in your kitchen, I know, but that's something that annoys me. One thing that the OXO has, which is different from the others, is it does have a little area inside the base of the kettle so that you can wind up the cable so you can make it really, really neat and make it exactly the length that you want so you don't have any excess slack, which I think is a really nice practical feature. But I would have loved it if it had a kettle lead. Other problems, the STAGG, it broke. Okay, I used it a fair amount for a few months, for a couple of months, and then a month and a half, 2 months, and then I started to see glitches in the electronics. And they would sort of be intermittent, which is the worst kind of fault because you never know if it's going to work or not. Most of the time it worked, but it would sometimes just glitch. You'd see the screen would glitch out a little bit. I think a lot of that is to do with this base, which is plastic, which is, you know, the build quality is not as nice as the Brewista, which has this either hard plastic or I think it's glass on top. And therefore it was this plastic with this single dial, which is a lovely feature. We're going to talk about styling in a bit, but it allowed water to drip and I think leak into the base. And so if the base got wet, it would start to glitch out. So build quality on this really let me down. Even though when I first took it out of the box, I was like, wow, that's really good. And definitely the kettle itself looks and feels good. I will also say though, that the lid leaked a fair amount. And if you, in some circumstances, I can't remember if it was when it was overfilled or if it was very low, but it would suddenly splutter out with boiling water. It would be very, very extreme splutter coming out of this kettle. So the lid, not so great. Also, this is a screw top on here. And yes, you can tighten it, but it just seems to come loose more often than I would have wanted. The other thing which I found frustrating, annoying, and I was swearing at the kettle was this display is not bright enough and you can only look at it from a high angle. If you're sitting down and you're looking across at a lower angle, the visibility on it is terrible. Now, I don't know, again, if the new models have addressed this issue, but I'm just talking about the original. So build quality on this was the lowest. Let's talk about the Bonavita. Bonavita, very similar build quality to the Brewista, which I love, but the buttons were a little bit plasticky and clunky, and they were clearly worried about water spilling on it because they provided the kettle with a plastic cover. So you could put a plastic cover over all the buttons. Practical, but not particularly aesthetically nice, and also shows a lack of forethought in design if you're going to have to throw in a plastic cover to try to protect against splashes. The Brewista, however, is excellent build quality. The top doesn't, yes, there's plastic, but it doesn't feel plasticky. It's got this glass on top, very, very sturdy, can just take loads of splashes. I mean, I've had so much water spilling on this, not a problem at all. The lid has good fit. It dribbles a tiny bit, and sometimes you can get a splutter out of it, but generally it's very, very good. So I rate the Brewista very, very highly. Number 1, and then the Bonavita number 2, and then the fellow STAGG EKG number 3. So where does the OXO fit in? I think the build quality on this is excellent. The kettle itself has excellent build quality. Really, really good. The stainless steel is thicker than the Brewista, and that's important when we talk about temperature control or energy consumption, because this kettle loses heat so quickly. And I'm not going to sort of mark it down in terms of build quality. I'll mark it down more in terms of temperature later on, but that was very, very annoying. This is very, very nice, thick stainless steel. This grip is gorgeous. I think OXO are well known for their grips, but this really, this rubber or plastic, the feel of it, it's not sticky, but it's got such a good grip. It feels like it's never going to slip. Whereas this one, you know, you're not going to, but it has a bit more of a slip to it. So do the others. This one is great. So the OXO kettle is good. The lid is lovely, very nice, tight fitting. However, it does dribble a little bit, similar to the Brewista, maybe a touch more. And so you have to watch out for that. I've not noticed any splutter on it. You can see that the bottom, however, is more of a cheapy sort of plastic. It feels a bit lighter. So that's I would say, a little bit of a markdown. I'd have liked a little bit more of a luxurious feel to it, or a little bit more of a premium feel. The top does have, I don't think that's glass, but I think it's a sort of clear hard plastic. That's nice. So we've got the same single dial control as the Fellows. I've used this for a few months now, so I haven't noticed any issues. With the Fellow STAGG EKG, I noticed it relatively early on. You'll notice that it's set further away, so this is right underneath the kettle. Any drips will definitely go onto that rotary knob, whereas here it's set further away. And so I think that that will probably help, and I hope that it's going to continue to perform well. If I notice anything, as you know, after this review has been released, I'll put them in the description below so you can sort of read my updates. But as of now, I think the build quality is excellent. I don't think it's quite the same build quality as the Brewista, because I love the durability of this base. So I'm giving first place to the Brewista. I'm doing joint second for OXO and Bonavita, and the fellow STAGG EKG comes in third place. Right, let's talk about style. Now, of course, this is personal preference. You all have your own personal tastes. However, I think that if you polled 100 people and showed them the silhouette of these kettles, I think that the STAGG EKG would come up on top. Fellow is well known for all of their really, really amazing designs, really looks beautiful. And I think that the STAGG is the most beautiful kettle of the bunch. Very lovely, unique design. It's got this flask quality to give it that sort of utilitarian laboratory feel. The sleek lines makes it feel a little bit Scandinavian. You get these beautiful angles in the spout and on the handle with this little thumb rest here. Very, very lovely silhouette of the kettle. The base is simple, small footprint. The rotary dial, whilst it has its issues with durability, is certainly stylishly very, very sleek and simple. So I think that if you just look at the looks and the stylings, I think that the STAGG comes out on top. The Bonavita, yes, it's not ugly. It looks all right. Similar in terms of shape as the Brewista. It has this not very nice plasticky bit in the handle, which I didn't really like. And as I said before, the look of the LEDs are very harsh. The buttons are clunky. You've got that plastic cover as well. So I don't think it's very high in terms of my styling. If you compare that with the Brewista, I think that the Brewista has good styling. I like it. I like the look. I like the cleanliness of this top with this glass on top and the buttons, illuminating like that. I think styling wise, it's a pretty kettle. So my initial review, or my last review, was the fellow STAGG EKG number 1, Brewista number 2, Bonavita number 3. Now let's talk about the OXO. I really like the styling. Let's start with the base. So the base, you've got that single rotary knob, just like the STAGG EKG, which I think, again, gives it a really minimal look. In fact, the whole thing about this is minimal utilitarian, which I'm a big fan of. So I like the rotary knob. I hope that it's going to last in terms of durability. I think that it is let down, but the style is let down by this base because it is a bit plasticky. It feels a bit light. It doesn't have the same weight as even the fellow STAGG EKG, but look at that footprint. It's tiny. When I took it out, I was like, wow, that's amazing. If you're tight on space, this is an amazing kettle because the footprint on it is very small. And if you turned it like this, then you're not even getting much footprint outwards, right? It's just this much. You're sort of talking about a square that big or a rectangle that big. So I think that the base, whilst it has a bit of a cheap feel to it, the rotary knob simplicity and the footprint is excellent. In terms of the styling of the kettle itself, I really like it. Now, you don't have choice of colors like you would with the Brewista and the STAGG EKG. I can't remember what you can get with the Bonavita. But clearly, these two kettles are much more expensive, $180, $160 versus $100. And they're much more marketed for design and for style and for you tailoring the look exactly how you want for your setup, whereas this is much more functional. But I don't mind that. I have no problem with a brushed stainless steel finish. In fact, it doesn't show fingerprints nearly as much as black and water marks. It's actually easier to look clean. And I think that the styling with this, again, it's sort of mimicking the Stagg a little bit, this flask shape. It may not have the same angular beauty as the Stagg, but I think it's very, very pretty kettle. Yeah, you could say maybe it has a little bit of a catering kitchen feel to it, but I think that would be a bit harsh. I think it looks like a kettle that a professional would use in a kitchen that's not messing around, that's not concerned about styling it, you know, and looking good. But it's effortless in its looks, and it's based around functionality. So I really like the styling of this. One criticism I would have for it, one other criticism apart from the base being a bit plasticky, is you can't turn off the sounds on this kettle. Now, that might not bother you, but when I'm having a tea session, I don't really like beeps happening. Luckily, the beeps on it are pretty inoffensive. They are only really for when it reaches temperature and when the hold temperature function stops. So I'll talk about that later, but basically it will keep the water hot for half an hour. After that half an hour, it beeps just to say, hey, I'm not going to keep your water hot anymore. So there's only 2 instances that I found that it beeps. It's not very loud. It's not very persistent. So I'm okay with it. It's fine. As I said, this is now my studio kettle. So like I'm even happy for it to be in here while I'm filming and hearing that beep. But it would have been nice, OXO, if there was just some way to turn off the beeps on it. So that's the only thing. Let's take a look at the displays. I haven't plugged this one in, but you can see here, both very, very clear. Similar, the sort of white LED, the rotary knob, you can change temperature on it. I really love the fact that there's less buttons. So on the Brewista here, you've got the on button, you've got the temperature preset button where you flick through the presets. And you may think, okay, that's very useful. But to me, it's very rare that I'm changing the temperature to such a big degree that I'm turning this knob a lot. It's going to be around 80, and then I'm going to go up to 89 or 95. So it's literally like quarter turns. It's really nothing. Whereas actually when you're pressing this, oftentimes you have to cycle through them all because you're too high up and you want it to go low. So you've got to go higher and then you go low. So I actually think that the convenience of this is, it's okay to have, but it's not really as convenient as just a simple rotary knob. Then you've got manually selecting temperature, so that's exactly the same as a rotary knob, and the rotary knob is much more efficient, whereas push is a bit annoying. Then you've got your temperature units choice, so Fahrenheit and Celsius, which is nice. Okay, you've got a separate one, but how often are you going to change that? If you're a Fahrenheit person, you're a Fahrenheit person. If you're a Celsius person, you're a Celsius person. If you want to change it here, you hold this down and then you can flick between them, right? So it's super simple to do that, and then it's locked in with your choice. So again, I don't think that is, you know, necessary to have a button if there was some other way to do it. Then here you've got your fast boil function, which is probably the button you'll use the most. You turn it on and you go, glunk, just bring me to 100 degrees. Yeah, okay, that's nice functionality. So if you were, let's say, at 93, you would have to turn it to 100 to get there, but it's hardly a big deal. And that's your keep warm function. We'll talk about that later. Both of these kettles have a keep warm function, but we'll discuss them later. But I think that the style of the look and the control of this is excellent. And I'm finding it difficult to pit these apart. So I'm going to give these both joint second place. So STAGG EKG on pure looks and stylings will get number 1. These will be level at number 2, and the Bonavita is number 3. Let's talk about capacity, and this is a very quick one. I like capacity to be larger, ideally, because I don't want to fill up my kettle that much. If you are a barista brewing coffee, maybe that's not your preference. The STAGG is at 0.9 liters, the smallest of the bunch. The OXO and the Bonavita are 1 liter, right up to the max fill line, and if you go over there, it's not advisable. The Brewista is 1 liter up to the max fill line, but it's got a fair amount of headroom, so you can probably put 1.1, 1.2 liters in there. So for that reason, I'm giving Brewista number 1, OXO and Bonavita number 2, joint, and fellow Stagg EKG number 3. Right, speed of heating, a very important one for me because I don't like to wait a long time for my kettle to boil, especially given the amount of tea that I drink during a day. So I've got 1 litre of water here, and we're going to go from room temperature to boiling point. I do have a stopwatch here, so I'm going to start these at the same time. Push the button. So basically, just so you know the controls while this is now heating up, when you turn it on, it's flashing. As you saw, you can select temperature. When you selected the temperature, you push the button. Once you push the button, it's going to bring it to temperature. All good. It'll beep once it reaches temperature. Then there's timer function. We'll talk about that later. But you then will use the kettle. And when you put it back on, its keep warm function will keep it warm for half an hour. And we're going to talk about the pros and cons of that when we get to that section. You can hear the sound of this kettle. The sound of this kettle, I would say, if I'm being picky, I prefer the sounds of the Stagg and the Brewista. It's a little bit more of a smooth rumble. This is a bit granular in sound, a bit, but it's fine. I mean, we're talking super geek here, right? But I used to be a sound engineer, and so, you know, a slight difference, but it's fine. It still has there's nothing rattling. It feels like a good quality, build quality is contributing to a good, relatively isolated sound. Okay, so let's compare the speed of heating. The Brewista is the slowest at 6 minutes 40 to bring 1 litre to a boiling point. The Bonavita was at 6 minutes, so very similar time of heating between the Brewista and the Bonavita. Too slow in my opinion. 6 minutes, 6 minutes 40 for this one. 6 minutes for the Bonavita is very, very slow. The Stagg EKG, definitely the fastest. Boiled up 0.9 litres, important, in 3 minutes and 50 seconds. So you could probably add 10% to that. You're probably looking at about 4 minutes 20, maybe, something like that, to bring a litre up to a boil. That's a guess, maybe 4 minutes 30, something like that. So we are currently at 3 minutes, and we're at 78 degrees here. So we'll see when it beeps, but you can see this is a fast kettle. This is up there with the Stagg EKG and way faster than the Brewista and the Bonavita. Okay, so we come up to boiling point now. I didn't want to make you wait too long. It's 4 minutes 20. Let's wait for the beep. So you can hear that beep is inoffensive. 4 minutes 25 seconds. So 4 minutes 25 seconds. I think that that's pretty comparable to the Stagg EKG. When you think that it was 3 minutes 50 for 0.9 litres, it's probably going to be similar there or thereabouts. So excellent, excellent, excellent speed of boiling here with this kettle. So I will give, I'll give Stagg EKG number 1 because I do think it'll be just slightly faster, but this will be coming in at a very close second. And then you have the Bonavita as third and the Brewista in last place. Right, let's talk about accuracy. Bonavita was excellent accuracy. Really, really hardly ever overshot. I think it's the best of the bunch. Albeit, when it would reach target temperature, it would slow down to a crawl, and that would annoy me. So let's say you set it to sort of 90 degrees Celsius. Once it gets to sort of 84, it would almost stop, and you'd hear it just ticking. So it was focused on accuracy, but at the expense of convenience and speed. The accuracy of the Brewista, I noticed was fine for most of the time, but occasionally it would overshoot if you, let's say you brought the temperature to 90 degrees and then you were drinking, etc., and you left the kettle and it dropped down in temperature to about 80 degrees. And I will say, again, please make this very clear. The biggest problem with this kettle is it loses temperature so quickly, which is annoying. Because if you're brewing something and then like you've set it for 90 degrees, you come back 5 minutes later and it's already at like 80, 70 degrees, you're always going to have to bump up the temperature. That uses up energy, number one, and number two, it tended to overshoot because it's almost like the kettle was going, okay, I'm turning on, and it would just go, and then so oh no, I've got to turn off. It didn't realize that it was too close to target temperature, and so it would overshoot, and the fellow would overshoot as well. This one, I've not noticed any. My fault. I've not noticed any issue with accuracy on this one. So I will say that accuracy is shared first place between the OXO and the Bonavita, and shared second place between the STAGG and the Brewista. Right, let's talk about range. Very, very quick one. Obviously, you want a lot of different temperature ranges, but with tea, you want it to go fairly low so you can brew those gyokuros, those very, very delicate shade-grown teas that like, temperatures of sort of 50, 60 degrees. And this is a very easy one. All of these go down to 40 degrees, which is perfectly fine. That's 40 degrees Celsius. And you can't remember what that is in Fahrenheit. I'll put it down here. But the Bonavita only went to 60, which means that's last place, and these are all tied. So all tied first place, and the Bonavita is last place. Right, let's talk about ease of use. Ease of use on these, they're all, all of these kettles are going to be easy for you to use. I do think, however, that there is, as I said before, an advantage with the simplicity of this rotary knob. Now, I'll say that maybe the controls need a little bit of time to get used to. Sometimes I was doing this and expecting that it was going to heat up and forgetting that you have to push it twice. On the Brewista, you've got to push once, and actually it will bring it to temperature, even just turning on. Yes, so you can just push once and it'll bring it to temperature. And so I was used to that, and so I'd be sitting there going, where's my water ready, and look across and go, oh, I forgot to push the button again, because you need to push it twice in order for it to heat up. So when you turn it on, you're selecting temperature. When you push it, it heats up. But once you get used to it, you get used to it. I think that this rotary knob is very, very simple. Less buttons to decipher, figure out. So I think that's really, really good. The display on it is very, very clear, unlike the STAGG EKG. One of my biggest problems, apart from the fact that it's not very durable, in my opinion, for very heavyweight use, that is an unacceptable display. Just terrible, terrible clarity. You could hardly see it at low angles at all. You'd have to always stand up, look at the display. This is extremely clear, much like the Brewista and the Bonavita. Very, very clear display. Very, very easy to use. I would say that this one is easier to use than the others because it's just a simple rotary display. So in terms of ease of use, I'm going to give OXO actually first place. I think it is the most easy to use. It's bright, clear display, very, very good feedback. The beep is inoffensive, and it's actually, a useful reminder if you're not bothered by the sound. So OXO, great. I find it difficult to split the Brewista and the Bonavita. I think in the last review I did split them, but I'm going to put them pretty much the same. They have the same sort of button functionality on them. Very similar design, in fact. So Brewista, Bonavita, ease of use, I would say pretty similar. Let's say second place. STAGG EKG, the worst. And yes, okay, it's got that simple rotary design. You can say it's same as the OXO, but like I said, that display was just infuriating. Absolutely infuriating. Hated it. Okay, so let's talk about the keep warm function. All of these kettles have a keep warm function, so it'll keep the water to the temperature that you want, but they operate in different ways. The Brewista and the Bonavita have a separate button here, which you have to remember to press. So when you use your kettle, when you put the kettle back on, you've got to remember to push that button, and it will then keep the temperature, the water temperature at the temperature that you've set it at. So it's good because you've got to remember, and therefore you're not going to mistakenly just sort of keep water boiling and use up energy and waste energy. But it's bad because you have to remember, right? And so oftentimes you'll put it on, you'll be brewing, you're not going to think about it, and then you'll go back to the kettle 10 minutes later and it's cooled down, especially this one here, which loses heat, and then you go, oh, I've got to push the button. So this is a matter of preference. Do you want to have that control? And if so, then you're going to have to remember to push the button. These two here have like an auto keep warm function, but they are different. The STAGG EKG has a button at the back. It's like a little rocker switch at the back to switch it on or off the hold. And so every time you put, if it's set on hold temperature, then every time you put the kettle back onto the base, it will always keep it at temperature. Sounds good. Was very convenient for those sort of long sampling sessions. I wouldn't have to think about it, just put the kettle back and it was always going to keep it warm. The problem, the big problem with this is that it doesn't turn off. And so if I forget to switch the kettle off, I could go away for the whole day and come back and the kettle would still be keeping the water hot. This one here has a similar function. When you put it on, you don't have to push any button, it will keep it warm, but it will keep it hot for 30 minutes and then have an auto cutoff and then give you a little beep to say, I'm no longer keeping this temperature hot. So that's great. So you've got the convenience of just being able to put the kettle on without having to remember to push anything, and it will always keep the temperature hot. But if you're not wanting it to, keep it hot because you're about to go out, you have to remember to switch the kettle off. Otherwise, it will use electricity for 30 minutes. So it has its pros and cons. The ideal situation would be keep this, but just have a little rocker switch on the back to turn that off if you wanted to. That would be great. Or some other ability to just switch off that function, because there is no way to switch off that function. You can't turn off on this the keep hot function. You've got to remember to switch off the kettle. If you put the kettle back on its base, and let's face it, if you're brewing and you're brewing a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, the likelihood of you remembering to switch it off every time is, well, it's a lower probability, and therefore you are going to be using electricity. And I have noticed my electricity bills have gone up since having this kettle. So I've got to remember to switch it off. And so for that reason, it's sort of, it's really close, but not quite there. And so I'm going to, in terms of scoring, give the Bonavita first place, because I think that, in terms of energy consumption and in terms of the ability to keep hot, the Bonavita probably is the best. You might say, well, what about Brewista? Isn't it the same? Yes, it is, but because it loses heat, you're using much more energy. So, the keep hot function on this has to work much harder. So this will be number 2. And I'll also share that number 2 spot with the OXO, because I really did enjoy being able to just put the kettle on and for it to bring it back up to temperature without having to do anything. And I just had to train myself to switch off. But at least there's a functionality on here where there's an auto cutoff that if I forgot, it was only going to be 30 minutes. And the STAGG EKG comes in at last place. All right, let's move on to timer functions. We all like timer functions if we're doing pour over coffees, but I also like them when I'm doing tea, especially if I've got lots of teas that I'm brewing and I just want to have a running timer. All right, let's talk about the differences. The Brewista, you take it off, you push the timer function, all good, it starts counting, right? Fine. Same with the Bonavita, pretty much exactly like this. They sort of have base designs and functionality on them. They're differences, but there's a lot of similarities. So you've got a standalone button, all good. You've got a countdown. Couple of problems with it. The first is that if you put the kettle back on, the timer stops. Annoying, really, really annoying. Frustrating, because if I'm brewing tea, I'm pouring and I'm putting the kettle down. I don't want to have to hold the kettle for no reason. Now, if you're doing pour over coffee, that's different, of course, and these are designed for pour over coffee. But for tea, that's really annoying. I don't want the timer to stop. So that's one problem. The other problem, less of an issue, is that, when you push the timer, it just starts counting up. With the fellow STAGG EKG, what you have is a countdown. So it counts down 3, 2, 1, and then starts counting up. Again, it's a small thing, but I actually really liked it. It allowed me to push the button and then get ready, look, and then go. Pour it really accurately. Whereas this, you tend to hit this, and by the time you move over to your tea or your coffee, you're already 3 or 4 seconds in, unless you've got them right next to each other. So those are the 2 drawbacks of the Bonavita and the Brewista. The fellow STAGG EKG has the best countdown function. I don't have it plugged in, so I can't show you. But essentially, you push and hold the button. It starts to go 3, 2, 1. You pour. You can put the kettle back down, and the stopwatch keeps going. So, and it actually, I think it still heats up the water if your water is low. So it has great timer functionality, absolutely the best of the bunch. The OXO is sort of in between. You heat the water up and you take the kettle off, you hold that button and it starts to count up. So same as the Brewista and the Bonavita. That's great. And you can put the kettle back down and it keeps the timer going. So great. It has some of the same features as the STAGG EKG in that you can put the kettle back down. That's probably the biggest factor for me in terms of timer, which is why I really, really like it. But there are a couple of problems. The first is, like I said, it doesn't have a countdown. It just starts a stopwatch going up. Not a major deal. The second problem, which is more of a major deal, is that the timer will not work unless the kettle has been brought to temperature, right? So I've got to wait for it. So if I wanted to pull it off now and I wanted to push that button, that's no timer. That's annoying, right? I've got to wait for it to beep. Now when I do it, it will. Bizarre, I know, but you can see it keeps going. It's good and it has that keep warm function on there. So, I mean, everything else is fine, but that's just a bit annoying. Like if I just want to, I don't want it to get to 100 or 99. I want to start brewing at 95. I can't. It's got to reach set temperature, otherwise the timer function doesn't work. I'm sure there's a way to figure that out. That's an annoyance. So in terms of the timer function, fellow STAGG EKG gets number 1, the OXO gets number 2, and Brewista and Bonavita share 3rd place. Right, let's talk about the all-important pour. In order to do that, I'm gonna move the STAGG out of the way and show you this pour. The pour on all of the kettles are good in terms of control. They will all give you very good, close, slow pours. Very good control. However, there are big problems with the STAGG EKG. The STAGG EKG pour is 1 speed only. You can't speed it up. It only goes that speed. Notice a little leak there. So it's annoying. If you're brewing pour over coffee, it might not be a problem for you. But when you're brewing tea, when you want to have some variation, to be able to create some dynamism in the way that you're pouring, it is very frustrating. The Bonavita pour was good, but a little bit 1 speed as well from my memory. The Brewista is an immaculate pour. From slow to fast, you can really pour very, very well. And so I was very interested to find out the pour on this. The spout on this has a different shape, I noticed. And as soon as I did this, I thought, okay, it's got slow speed. But look at that. This pour is as good as the Brewista, and that is saying something. So in terms of pour, OXO and Brewista get 1st place. 2nd place goes to Bonavita, and 3rd place goes to the terrible pour of the STAGG EKG, which only has 1 speed. All right, final category is just general ergonomics, how it feels brewing. I will say that they all are excellent kettles. They will all do the job. They all feel pretty good. But the Bonavita is definitely the least enjoyable to use because that grip, there's something about the grip that's not very pleasant to hold. It sort of crunches your hand up in a weird way. I didn't like it. The Brewista is lovely to use. It's very, very nice to use. It's got good balance. It's got good control. I think the ergonomics on it are excellent. I would say that it is as good as the STAGG EKG. Some people might prefer the STAGG EKG for this little thumb holder that gives you maybe a little bit more precision when you're doing pour over coffees. Perhaps that's a fair point to make with coffee baristas, but for tea it's not really that important. And the ergonomics on these, I would say, are very, very good. I would say joint 2nd place, and I think this is number 1. the ergonomics, the feel of this kettle is just excellent. As I said before, the grip, there is no more comfortable grip in any of the kettles than this. Not just in terms of the feel of not being able to, of it not being slippery, but also the way it makes your hand feel. It doesn't crunch your fingers up into these harder surfaces. And this can burn you, this metal rim here. So be very, very careful with the Stagg, which is another reason why I sort of mark it down a little bit in terms of ergonomics. This kettle I have had no issues with at all. I love using it. It feels super controlled. It feels so balanced in my hand. And that grip is excellent. As I said, I know OXO are well known for their grips, and I can see why. That is just the best kettle grip that I've ever used. And so ergonomics, I'm going to give number 1 to the unhyped contender here of OXO. And if you look at this list, you will see if we add up all of the scores where lowest score wins, the OXO is head and shoulders above the competition. OXO number 1, Brewista and Bonavita sort of are neck and neck with the Brewista, just coming out on top, I would say, and the STAGG EKG is trailing in last place. But that is a shocker. $105 kettle, so much cheaper, not hyped about, not all over Instagram, just not really talked about apart from possibly, I have had some messages from people saying, try the OXO. So I know it's a used kettle, but it doesn't have the same amount of exposure as the other kettles. And maybe that's because OXO, you are not in the UK and not in Europe, and you are restricting this kettle for some bizarre reason to the US. You have OXO utensils in UK and I think in Europe. So why not the kettle? I don't know. And so this review is to commend you that you have made, in my opinion, the best kettle for pour overs and for tea out of all of the kettles, including much more expensive contenders, but also to shame you. Come on, you need to allow other people to have this kettle. So this kettle should be available in the UK, in Europe, and in other parts of the world. It has from day one delighted me. And Adam, I understand why you went to all the trouble of buying this, buying the voltage converter and sending it all to me. Thank you so much for doing that. This is now my studio kettle. It has replaced my Camjove, which for those of you who know, that is a much loved, for more sentimental value kettle, but it has replaced it. The Camjove lid broke, but it is a worthy replacement. Small footprint, very stylish, very functional, great ergonomics, incredible speed, great keep warm function. Just excellent, excellent, excellent. A few bugbears. Let's quickly talk about the pointers. So OXO, if you are listening, these are the things that I would like you to change, if possible. Number 1, try to make it so you could put a kettle lead in here. It would be really nice for me to have a changeable lead length. Number 2, let me turn off the noises, please. That would be good. Number 3, just take a look at your lid. There's a bit of dribbling. I mean, it's pretty comparable to the others, but you can always work to improve. Number 4, you might want to think about just upgrading a little bit the feel of this part of the plasticky base. Not a huge one, but if you are going to do that, you might be able to increase the price a bit, and I think people would be happy about it. Number whatever. Next one is the keep warm function on it. If you just had a little rocker or something that allowed me to say, no, I don't want keep warm function on, and that way I'm not going to waste electricity, that would be great. I like the fact that I don't have to remember I put it on and it has a cutoff at 30 minutes. It's good, but in terms of energy saving, it would be nice for people to go, no, I'm in energy saving mode. I'm going to turn that off and I will just manually reheat. And lastly, that timer function. Does it really need to reach the prescribed temperature before the timer function is accessible? I don't see the reason for that. And if you're working on the timer, give a little countdown. That would be good as well. But these are very small points which hopefully are, actionable by OXO to make a near perfect kettle. There are other ideas in my head, but those are my ideas for maybe my own kettle in the future. So, a shocker maybe, the cheaper, unhyped kettle is absolutely my number one. If you're asking me which is the best kettle to buy for tea, I will tell you OXO number one if it's in your area, Brewista number two. The others is sort of there or thereabouts. If you love the style and the look, then sure, the STAGG EKG will do you well. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. As I said, any updates, I will post them down below. Sorry this video is so long, but hey, hopefully you got a lot out of it. And I will continue to review kettles as they come. That's it, tea heads. Check out our other videos, taste our teas wherever you're on the world by browsing mayleaf.com, and come visit us if you're ever in London. Other than that, I'm Don from Mayleaf. Thank you for being part of the revelation of true tea. Stay away from those tea bags. Keep drinking the good stuff and spread the word, because nobody deserves bad tea. Bye.